It's one of those stories, the ones that just stop you in your tracks. Woman lit on fire on NYC subway. You've probably seen it. It's hard to even wrap your head around something so awful.
Absolutely. It's the kind of headline that just hits you in the gut.
And that's exactly why we're here today. We want to, go beyond that initial shock. Try to understand what happened, the context, the bigger issues this case might be showing us.
Yeah, you're right. Headlines, they just don't do it justice, There's so much more to uncover. We've got news reports, video footage, even court documents, some political takes on it too. A lot to dig into.
So let's set the stage a bit. December 22nd, an F train in Brooklyn, early morning.
Right.
The victim, Debrina Quam from New Jersey.
Yep.
She was asleep on the train when this attack happened. And what's so disturbing from the video footage is how calm the attacker seems. Just walks up to her and uses a lighter to set her clothes on fire. No struggle, no warning. It's chilling.
It really is. And what's even more unsettling, witnesses and the footage, they both show that the suspect didn't run away right away. He stayed, watched as the fire burned.
Hung around.
Exactly. And that behavior, staying at the scene, it can actually tell investigators a lot about the attacker's mindset. Could be shock. Maybe he was disoriented, didn't have an escape plan. There are a few possibilities there.
I remember reading that former NYPD Commissioner Bernard Carrick, he was, furious about the fact that no one stepped in, called them cowards.
Yeah, and we actually have a clip of his statement.
Let's hear it.
This is Carrick talking about the bystanders.
Wow.
Powerful stuff.
It is. It makes you wonder, what would you do in that situation? I mean, really.
It's a question we all hope we never have to actually face, right? But it's why understanding, the whole bystander effect thing, that's so important. High stress, crazy situations, our brains can just kind of freeze up. We don't know how to react, especially when there are other people there. It's like we think someone else will take care of it.
So it's not always about being a coward.
Right. Not necessarily. It's this almost like an instinct, You just freeze.
Right, right.
Plus, we can't forget the fear. People are probably terrified thinking they could be next. And then there's the legal stuff, too. People are afraid of lawsuits these days, even if they try to help.
It's a lot to think about in a split second, for sure. But thankfully, the suspect was caught quickly.
Yeah, and that was all because of some high school students. They were really sharp. They saw the pictures the police put out, recognized the suspect on another train, and reported him immediately. Community awareness in action.
So about the suspect, 33-year-old Sebastian Zepeda. Turns out, allegedly undocumented immigrant from Guatemala, deported back in 2018.
Oh, wow.
And his last known address was a homeless shelter in Brooklyn, specifically for men struggling with substance abuse and mental health issues.
This brings up a really important point, and we need to be careful here. Homelessness, mental health, and crime, it's all connected, but it's complicated. Not everyone who's homeless or dealing with mental health issues is going to commit a crime. That's just not true, and it's harmful to think that way.
You're absolutely right. But we also can't ignore the fact that these factors, they can make people vulnerable. And that vulnerability, sadly, it can lead to becoming a victim, or in some cases, a perpetrator. It's a tough, complex situation for sure.
It is. And of course, this case has brought up the whole debate about subway safety in the city, especially in New York. Governor Kathy Hochul had tweeted not long before this about improved safety measures and how crime was going down. Then boom, this horrific attack. Plus there was another stabbing, fatal one the day before on a Queens subway. Tough timing for that tweet.
Yeah, the timing was not great. But it does make you wonder, what did the numbers actually say? What did the data tell us?
Well, the NYPD has reported a decrease in crime overall this year. Major felonies, they're down almost 2% compared to last year. But this case really shows us sometimes the statistics don't match how people feel.
Yeah. I mean, no matter how many stats you throw out there, a lot of people are still scared, especially on the subway. It's a real fear.
Absolutely. And it's a tricky balance. How do you make people feel safe when the reality, the data, might say something different? And then you've got politics mixed in, both sides using statistics and stories to push their own agendas. It's hard to get a clear picture of what's really going on.
Right. And then this case has another layer to it. New York City's sanctuary city status. This ties directly into the suspect's background and the whole conversation about immigration. Can you break down sanctuary city for us? What does it mean, practically speaking?
Sure. Basically, sanctuary city policies, they limit how much local law enforcement works with federal immigration authorities. So even if someone's undocumented and commits a crime, the local police might not automatically report them for deportation. It's controversial for sure. Supporters say it builds trust between immigrant communities and the police, while critics worry about safety risks. Valid points on both sides.
It definitely adds another layer of complexity, no doubt. But before we get into the political side of things, let's go back to something we touched on earlier, something really disturbing. The bystander effect, the people who saw what was happening and didn't jump in right away.
Yeah, it's tough to watch the video, the witnesses. They say there were people there, even some police officers, who didn't intervene immediately. And that sparked a lot of anger, a lot of people condemning them, like we heard from Bernard Carrick, calling those present cowards.
Yeah, we heard that clip, and it's hard to disagree with how he feels. Emotionally, it makes sense. But is it really fair to call everyone who didn't jump in a coward?
That's the thing about the bystander effect. It's not always about lacking courage or compassion. Like I was saying before, in these super stressful, confusing situations, our brains can kind of short circuit. We don't know how to act, especially with other people around. We kind of assume, oh, somebody else will do something.
It's like we passed the buck almost.
Yeah, like a diffusion of responsibility. And then there's the fear factor too. Like, are you going to jump in when someone's being lit on fire? It's scary.
You could be the next target.
Exactly. And then you got the legal stuff these days. What if you try to help and something goes wrong? People get sued for anything.
So many things going through your head.
Yeah, in a split second. It's a lot to process. This case also really got people talking about immigration. Specifically, illegal immigration and, well, the idea that it's connected to crime.
Yeah, Fox and Friends really jumped on that. They kept bringing up the fact that the suspect was here illegally, had a record in Arizona, and how sanctuary cities are basically magnets for criminals. They were calling for stricter border control, more deportations, the whole 9 yards.
It's a hot button issue, for sure, and emotions run high. But we gotta be careful, Separate fact from all the noise. This guy was here illegally, that's true, had an arrest record. But we can't just use that to say all immigrants, all undocumented immigrants are criminals. That's just not true. And frankly, a lot of studies actually show that immigrants, even undocumented ones, they commit crimes at a lower rate than people born here.
That's important to remember. We can't let fear and one case dictate how we see an entire group of people. Gotta look at the data, the research.
Exactly. And the context, too. Why do people immigrate, legally or not? A lot of times it's economic. They're looking for better lives, running from poverty, violence. To say it's just about crime, that's ignoring a much bigger picture.
They were talking about Tom Homan on Fox and Friends, too, the former ICE director. His whole stance on deporting undocumented immigrants with criminal records. What was that again?
Oh, yeah. Homan, he's been a big advocate for, the hardline approach to immigration. He wants stricter enforcement, things like the Remain in Mexico policy, where asylum seekers have to stay in Mexico while their cases are being processed here. His argument is that this stuff deters illegal immigration, protects national security, that whole thing.
And of course, Trump's policies came up too, specifically the border wall and the increase in deportations.
Yeah, Trump's immigration policies were, let's just say controversial. Some people loved them, said he was finally putting America first, securing the border. Others said it was inhumane, discriminatory. And the debate hasn't gone away, even now. Biden's taken a different approach, more focused on, addressing the root causes of migration, making legal immigration easier.
It's a complicated issue, that's for sure. Strong opinions on both sides. The Wall Street Journal even had an editorial asking, are Democrats trying to bring in undocumented immigrants to replace the people leaving blue states?
Whoa, that's an interesting one. It makes you think about population shifts, political motives, all that. It's true, some blue states like California, New York, they've been losing people. And at the same time, their undocumented immigrant populations have grown. But to say it's some kind of a plan, a strategy, that's a big leap. Not a lot of evidence to support that.
Right. We got to be careful about jumping to conclusions, attributing motives without any real proof. And it's worth noting, the Wall Street Journal editorial board, they tend to lean conservative, right? They haven't exactly been fans of Democratic policies.
Good point. We always have to think about the source, any potential bias, especially when it comes to politics. It's on us to be smart about what we read, what we believe, especially these days.
Absolutely. So, we've covered a lot of ground. This horrific crime, the suspect, the whole bystander thing, subway safety, sanctuary cities, the immigration debate. It's a lot to take in. And the answers, they're not easy to come by.
And it's fascinating, isn't it, how all these things, they're connected. This one event, this tragedy, it exposes all these cracks in our society, the challenges, the conversations we need to be having.
Yeah, it's a lot, isn't it? And honestly, it can feel kind of overwhelming. Like, where do we even start? But maybe that's the point, right? That these issues, they are complex, they're all tangled up together, and we can't ignore them.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's so easy to get caught up in the emotions, the blame game, the politics of it all. But what we really need is to take a breath and talk about this stuff, honestly, and with nuance. We gotta challenge our own biases, listen to different viewpoints, be okay with the fact that there aren't always clear-cut answers.
So it's a call to action, in a way. This case, as horrible as it is, maybe it can push us to be more informed, more involved citizens.
Absolutely. It's about realizing that we're not just watching this stuff happen, we're part of it. What we do, what we don't do, it matters. And yeah, we might not have all the solutions, but we can start with empathy, with awareness, with being willing to engage even when it's hard.
And that starts with
What?
asking the tough questions, not accepting things at face value, really trying to understand these issues on a deeper level.
Yeah.
We can't shy away from the difficult conversations. We have to see the complexity, and most importantly, we have to see each other, even in the middle of something this tragic.
That's a powerful way to put it. That's really what this deep dive has been about, peeling back the layers, exploring the nuances, and hopefully getting our listeners to keep thinking about all of this. If you want to learn more about anything we talked about today, we've got some links in the show notes. Good place to start.
Because the conversation doesn't stop here. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.